The Galactic Empire had always seen itself as a force above all others. With its vast fleets and fleets of soldiers, it had taken over countless worlds. Each victory only added to their arrogance. So when their gaze turned to Earth, a small, blue world in the far corner of the galaxy, they thought it was just another planet to conquer, another world to add to their collection. But they were wrong. Earth was no ordinary planet, and humanity was no ordinary species. The Empire, in its infinite pride, underestimated the one thing it should have feared the most: the resolve of humanity. For years, the diplomats from Earth had tried to engage with the Empire. They sent messages, offering peace, offering cooperation. But the Empire scoffed at their attempts, dismissing humanity as a primitive species that wouldn't last long in the vastness of space. They didn't believe that Earth had the strength to defend itself, let alone challenge the might of the Empire. Each message was ignored, each plea for peace brushed aside like an annoying fly buzzing around a monarch. But humans were not known for giving up easily. When the warnings failed, Earth did the unthinkable. They prepared. Hidden beneath the icy surface of the Arctic, ancient vaults lay dormant, designed to house humanity's final line of defense. These vaults were secret, built long before the Empire even knew of Earth's existence. Inside, frozen in deep cryogenic sleep, were the soldiers humanity would one day unleash when the time came. They had been frozen for decades, locked away in stasis until they were needed. And now, the time had come. The Empire's first move was a brutal attack. They didn't just destroy military outposts, they wiped out civilian colonies. Entire cities vanished in the blink of an eye, their inhabitants burned and left to freeze in the cold of space. The Empire called it a demonstration of power, showing the galaxy that no one could stand against them. But what they didn't realize was that in doing so, they had crossed a line, one that even the most advanced empire in the galaxy would soon come to regret. The human response was swift, but not the kind the Empire expected. No declaration of war was made. No fleets of ships descended on the Empire's outposts. Instead, an eerie silence fell over Earth's military. At first, the Empire thought it was an admission of defeat. But then, as weeks passed and no response came, a strange message was sent to the Empire's capital. It was simple, cold, and direct. You've made a mistake. The Empire dismissed it. They assumed it was an empty threat. They had wiped out entire civilizations before. What could a weak species like humanity do? They were wrong. Terribly wrong. Deep beneath the ice, in the forgotten vaults, the frozen soldiers began to awaken. Their bodies, enhanced through years of genetic modification and training, were now ready to move once more. Their memories were locked, but their instincts were sharp, honed for one thing: war. The moment the stasis pods were opened, the soldiers emerged, their eyes burning with the fury of those whose loved ones had been lost. They did not speak, did not question their orders. They only moved with the precision and discipline that had been drilled into them since their creation. They were humanity's last hope, and now they were awake. The first sign that the Empire had made a grave mistake came when their outer bases began to report strange activity. At first, it was just a flicker on the radar. Then, reports came in of mysterious figures moving through the ice, figures that no one had seen before. The Empire sent out reconnaissance ships, eager to catch what they thought were just pirates or rebels. But they found nothing. Only an eerie silence greeted them, broken only by the howling winds of the frozen tundra. And then, the attacks began. In the dead of night, the first of the Empire's military outposts vanished. The guards didn't even see it coming. No warning. No signs. Just the swift and silent approach of shadowy figures, faster than any living being should move, striking with deadly force. The Empire had thought that their military technology, their weapons, and their ships were invincible. But they had not accounted for the soldiers of Earth, men and women who had been frozen in time, preserved and enhanced to fight with an efficiency that made the Empire's greatest warriors look like children. One by one, the Empire's outer stations fell. No one could explain what was happening. There were no signs of battle. There were no cries for help. Just the silence of the frozen tundra, followed by the sudden, inexplicable disappearance of their forces. Rumors began to spread. Some said it was an invasion, but not of ships. Some believed the Earth had sent an army of ghosts. And then, the first transmission came from one of the surviving commanders. His voice cracked with fear. "They're not soldiers," he said. "They're shadows. They move faster than we can react. We can't stop them." In the heart of the Empire's military, panic began to spread. If they couldn't find a way to stop this mysterious force, their entire campaign would collapse. They called in their finest commanders, their strongest ships, and their deadliest weapons. They thought that strength alone would be enough to crush this unexpected rebellion. But they were wrong again. The final battle took place on a desolate moon, where the Empire had set up its command center. They were ready for anything except what came next. The cryo-soldiers, cold and emotionless, arrived without warning. Their armor gleamed under the pale light of the moon, their faces hidden behind dark visors. The first line of Empire defense was obliterated within seconds. The soldiers didn't hesitate. They didn't give orders. They simply fought. Each strike was calculated, each movement precise. The Empire's forces were overwhelmed by the sheer speed and ferocity of their attackers. In the chaos, one soldier emerged from the group, a towering figure with a jagged scar across his face. His name was Frostbite. His eyes were cold, yet burning with an intensity that sent shivers down the spine of any who looked into them. He was the leader, the one who commanded the others with silent authority. And it was he who delivered the final blow to the Empire's leadership. When the battle was over, Frostbite stood over the wreckage of the Empire's command center. His voice was calm, almost haunting as he spoke into the communication device. "We asked for peace. You brought war. Now, remember, this humanity does not forget." The Empire, for all its power, had underestimated the strength of a species that had nothing left to lose. And they would learn, too late, that when humanity is pushed too far, it unleashes something far more dangerous than an army. It unleashes its resolve. Deep beneath the frozen surface of the Arctic, in a place where no human foot had trod for decades, an ancient, forgotten vault hummed to life. The cold, harsh winds of the world above were the only thing that could reach the icy structure, yet the interior remained sealed, locked away from the world. Inside, nestled in rows, lay the silent soldiers of humanity's past. They were not ordinary soldiers. They were the product of years of genetic enhancement and unrelenting training. Their sole purpose had been to protect the Earth in the event of its destruction. But time had passed. The world had moved on. And the vaults had remained silent until now. The world above, ignorant of the dark secret beneath its feet, continued its routine. The Empire, a vast and powerful force that spanned countless star systems, had set its sights on Earth. They had already claimed numerous worlds, one after another, with ease. They believed that no species, especially not one as seemingly primitive as humanity, could stand against their might. They underestimated Earth, underestimated its people. And worst of all, they underestimated the one thing they could never have predicted: humanity's last line of defense. The first signs of trouble came when the Empire launched a surprise attack on a human colony at the farthest edge of known space. The colony was peaceful, barely advanced beyond basic space travel, yet it was wiped out in an instant. The Empire's fleet descended without warning, and within hours, the entire colony was reduced to rubble. Human lives, innocent and defenseless, were extinguished. The message sent back to Earth was simple: "We are coming for you next." The leaders of Earth were stunned. They had hoped that diplomacy could avoid such a conflict, but now they faced the cold reality of war. They scrambled to assemble a defense, but their efforts were far too slow. They could see the Empire's ships heading toward their solar system and the inevitable destruction that awaited. Panic spread throughout the nations. Some wanted to fight back with all they had, but the military forces of Earth were no match for the Empire's might. The people were desperate, but they didn't know where to turn. What they didn't know, however, was that beneath the icy silence of the Arctic, something was stirring. The vaults, long thought to be empty and forgotten, were beginning to hum with life once more. No one had set foot near the vaults in years. They'd been built in secret, long before the Empire even knew Earth existed. The vaults were designed for one purpose: to store humanity's last hope. The soldiers within were not ordinary humans. They had been modified, enhanced with the best of human technology and biological advancements to be stronger. As the Empire's fleet neared Earth, the first cryo soldier stepped out of his pod. He was tall, his body sleek with the strength of someone built for combat. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the room as if he had never been asleep. The process of awakening was seamless. There were no groggy stumbles, no confusion. These soldiers had been trained for battle, and they knew their purpose. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They simply moved. More soldiers began to awaken, one after another, until dozens of them stood together, a silent army waiting for their orders. They were not afraid. They had no fear, no doubt in their minds. They only had one mission: protect humanity, no matter the cost. The first test came quickly. As the Empire's ships entered Earth's atmosphere, they were met by a fleet of human vessels, but these were not the typical warships of the human military. They were small, unassuming ships, barely armed, but the pilots inside were something else entirely. They were the descendants of the soldiers who had been enhanced long ago, and they'd been trained to fight with the same precision and intensity as the soldiers beneath the ice. The battle that ensued was swift and brutal. The Empire's ships, technologically superior, were caught off guard by the ferocity and unpredictability of their attackers. For every ship they destroyed, another would appear, as if there was no end to the human force. Back on Earth, people watched in shock as the battle unfolded. News broadcasts were filled with reports of the unexpected resistance. The Empire had expected Earth to fall without a fight, but instead they found themselves facing something they had never seen before: human resilience. The soldiers, now fully awake and moving with purpose, spread across the globe. They did not make their presence known to the public, not yet. They were not there to be heroes, and they were not there to win hearts and minds. They were there to fight, to take back what had been lost, and to send a message to the Empire that no one could ever take Earth for granted again. The Empire's commanders were puzzled. Their sensors picked up the strange activity on Earth, but they could not identify the source of the attack. Ships were disappearing, bases were being wiped out, and their forces seemed to be evaporating into thin air. The soldiers didn't leave behind bodies or wreckage. They didn't make a sound as they fought. The only trace they left behind was the aftermath, the ruins of the Empire's technology. Scattered across the land, one of the Empire's commanders, in desperation, ordered a massive bombardment, sending waves of firepower to strike Earth's surface. They thought it would break the resistance, but the soldiers were ready. They knew the Empire would try to destroy them from above, and they had prepared for it. As the bombs fell, the cryo soldiers fought back with ruthless efficiency. They adapted to the Empire's tactics, outsmarted their weapons, and turned the tide of battle. With each passing day, the Empire's hold on Earth weakened. What they thought would be an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. The Empire's forces were retreating, their once mighty fleets scattered across the galaxy, unable to withstand the assault of the silent soldiers who had risen from the depths of Earth's past. In the final confrontation, when the last remnants of the Empire's fleet descended on Earth, the cryo soldiers faced them head-on. They fought without fear, without hesitation, and without mercy. The soldiers of Earth were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were the shadows, moving faster than their enemies could react. The final battle was not one of technology, but of willpower. And humanity's will was unbreakable. The message was clear: when humanity is pushed to the edge, when everything seems lost, there is a strength within them that can never be extinguished. And in the silence of the vaults, the last cryo soldier stood still, watching the sky as it cleared of the Empire's ships. His mission was complete. The Earth was safe once more. The silence of space was broken only by the faint hum of the fleet's engines as they drifted toward their target. The Empire had come, and they believed this would be just another easy conquest. Earth, a small, unremarkable planet in the vastness of the galaxy, was no more than a speck to the powerful beings who ruled the stars. Their technology was far superior, their fleets unstoppable, and their resolve unshakable. They had faced and crushed countless civilizations before, and Earth would be no different. Yet, what they didn't know was that Earth was not as defenseless as they thought. Humanity had something far more dangerous than weapons. They had the will to fight. It started with a warning, a single message sent from Earth to the Empire's fleet. It was brief, almost laughable to the Empire's commanders, but it carried a heavy weight. The message was simple: we are ready. The Empire dismissed it, seeing it as the last desperate gasp of a doomed species. They didn't know what it meant, but they didn't care. Earth had no military might, no advanced technology, and certainly no way to stop them. As their ships entered the orbit of Earth's largest city, they fired without hesitation. A barrage of missiles and energy blasts rained down, leveling entire blocks, reducing buildings to rubble. The city was caught off guard, people screaming as they tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. It was a massacre, and the Empire watched it all unfold with cold indifference. Yet, something strange happened amid the chaos. A single human ship, a small and unremarkable vessel by their standards, emerged from the shadows of the wreckage. It was old, its hull battered and worn, but it moved with a purpose. The crew inside, led by a man named Captain Elijah Sterling, had been preparing for this moment for years. They were humanity's last hope, and they had one simple goal: to strike back. Captain Sterling's ship, the Eagle's Fury, was not equipped with the advanced weaponry the Empire was used to encountering. In fact, it had very few weapons at all. But what it had was something the Empire never expected: human ingenuity. The Eagle's Fury was armed with a prototype device designed to manipulate the energy fields of enemy ships, turning their own power against them. The device, still in the testing phase, was the result of years of research and desperation. If it worked, it could disable or destroy even the most powerful of the Empire's vessels. If it didn't, Earth would fall, and humanity's resistance would end. Sterling's crew had no illusions about the odds. They knew that the Empire's fleet was overwhelming, but they also knew they had no other choice. They had to make the first strike. As the Eagle's Fury moved toward the closest Empire ship, the tension on board was palpable. The crew worked in silence, each person knowing their role. The ship's energy shields flickered to life, barely strong enough to withstand even the smallest hit, but that didn't matter. They weren't here to survive. They were here to make sure humanity's message was heard. When they got within range, Captain Sterling gave the order. The device was activated, and a brilliant pulse of energy shot out from the ship, hitting the nearest Empire vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a crackling sound filled the comms, followed by a sudden burst of static. The Empire ship's weapons systems sputtered, then shut down completely. The crew of the Eagle's Fury held their breath, unsure if it had worked. Then, without warning, the Empire ship's massive engines malfunctioned, causing it to drift uncontrollably toward the planet's surface. A massive explosion lit up the sky as it crashed down, leaving a trail of smoke in its wake. The Empire had suffered their first loss. The Empire's fleet was in chaos. Communications between their ships faltered, and their commanders scrambled to regain control. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. The Eagle's Fury wasn't the only ship with such a device. In the shadows of Earth's skies, other ships, smaller and less powerful, had begun to move. They were human ships, designed for this very moment, equipped with the same technology. As the Empire ships tried to regroup, they were struck again and again. The once mighty fleet was now disorganized, its ships turning on each other as the strange energy pulses disabled their weapons, engines, and shields. In their desperation, the Empire began to retaliate with greater force, launching missiles and energy blasts at the surface of Earth. But it was too late. The first strike had been made, and humanity had sent a message: they would not go down without a fight. Back on Earth, the news of the unexpected resistance spread like wildfire. People who had once lived in fear, unsure of their future, now saw a glimmer of hope. The battle was not over, but the tide had turned. They had taken the first step toward reclaiming their world. The Empire, however, was far from defeated. Their commanders, furious at the unexpected turn of events, regrouped and prepared for a full-scale assault. They believed that by unleashing their full power, they could crush humanity's resistance once and for all. But they had not yet learned the true strength of Earth's people. As the Empire's fleet began its final assault, Captain Sterling and his crew made their move. The Eagle's Fury dove into the heart of the Empire's fleet, weaving between ships and dodging incoming fire. The crew worked tirelessly, activating the device once more, sending pulses of energy into the enemy ships. With each strike, another vessel fell. The battle raged on for hours, but the Empire's resolve began to waver. They had underestimated the power of humanity, and now they were paying the price. The Empire's once proud fleet was now scattered and broken, its ships burning in the void of space. And in the center of it all, the Eagle's Fury stood strong, a symbol of humanity's first victory. When the battle finally ended, the skies above Earth were clear. The Empire's fleet had been reduced to nothing more than debris floating in space. Humanity had won the first strike, but they knew this was just the beginning. The Empire would regroup and they would come again. But humanity would be ready. Captain Sterling stood on the bridge of the Eagle's Fury, looking out at the stars. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. They had made the first strike, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. They were no longer a forgotten species on the edge of the universe. They were a force to be reckoned with. And in the quiet aftermath of the battle, as the ship's engines hummed softly, Captain Sterling whispered to his crew, "This is only the beginning." The world was on the brink of collapse. For years, humanity had been under the constant threat of invasion from the Zorath Empire, a ruthless alien race that sought to conquer every star system in their path. Earth had been their latest target, and its people were caught in the crossfire of a galactic war they never asked for. The Zorath were relentless, advanced, brutal, and determined to bring humanity to its knees. Despite their technological superiority, the people of Earth had fought back with everything they had. But it wasn't enough. Humanity's best efforts had been met with failure. Cities had been destroyed, billions of lives lost, and the once proud military forces had been decimated. It seemed like Earth was doomed. The Zorath had their foot firmly planted on the planet, and there was no sign of them letting up. Their warships blotted out the sky, their weapons reduced entire cities to ash, and their commanders issued orders with the cold, calculated efficiency of a race that had conquered countless worlds. But amidst the ashes of defeat, a spark of hope was kindling. In secret, a small group of humans had been working tirelessly to develop a new weapon, something that could turn the tide of the war. These were not soldiers or scientists, but ordinary people, ordinary humans who had been driven to the edge and were desperate enough to do whatever it took to save their home. They knew the stakes, and they knew the risks. The Zorath had no mercy, and neither would they. The weapon they had created was not a bomb or a laser. It was far more dangerous than that. It was a device that could disrupt the Zorath's entire fleet, disabling their ships and rendering their weapons useless. If it worked, it could give humanity the chance it so desperately needed. But there was a catch. The device was untested, its effects unpredictable. There was no guarantee that it would work at all. It was humanity's last gamble. The plan was simple, but risky. The device would be activated from the heart of the Zorath's military base, located in the largest city on Earth, now under their control. The base was heavily guarded, and the Zorath knew of every human within its walls. Yet, in the shadows, a small team of resistance fighters led by Captain Sarah Blackwell had infiltrated the city. Their mission was clear: activate the device and give humanity its first real chance to fight back. Captain Blackwell and her team knew the risks. They knew that once they entered the base, there would be no turning back. The Zorath would not show mercy. They had lost too much already, and they would stop at nothing to ensure humanity's destruction. But Blackwell was no stranger to risk. She had seen her family die, her city burn, and her comrades fall in battle. She wasn't about to let Earth fall without a fight. As they moved through the city, the oppressive silence of the Zorath occupation weighed heavily on them. The once bustling streets were now empty, the air thick with the remnants of destruction. The team moved quickly, staying out of sight and using the shadows as their cover. Their mission had to remain secret, or they would never make it to the base. When they finally reached the entrance to the Zorath base, their hearts were pounding. The base loomed before them like a dark fortress, its walls lined with alien sentries and weapons. The team had no illusions about the difficulty of their task. They would need to fight their way through the Zorath soldiers, disable the security systems, and reach the control room. It was a suicide mission, but there was no other choice. Humanity's fate was hanging by a thread, and this was the turning point. Blackwell gave the signal, and the team surged forward. They fought with all the fury of a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction. The Zorath soldiers were strong, but the humans were fueled by desperation. With every alien they brought down, the team felt a surge of hope that they could make it, hope that this would be the moment that changed everything. But the battle was far from over. As they moved deeper into the base, the Zorath responded with overwhelming force. Reinforcements poured in from every direction, and the team was forced to split up to cover more ground. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of gunfire. Every step they took was one closer to the control room, but with each step, they lost more of their own. One by one, team members fell, their cries of pain echoing through the corridors. Captain Blackwell pressed forward, knowing that she couldn't afford to stop. The device was close, just a few more rooms ahead. The Zorath had been caught off guard by the resistance, but now they were closing in on her. She could feel the weight of every fallen comrade on her shoulders, pushing her forward. Earth's future rested on her shoulders, and she couldn't afford to fail. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Blackwell reached the control room. The device was there, sitting quietly on a pedestal, waiting to be activated. But before she could reach it, a Zorath commander appeared in the doorway, blocking her path. His eyes glowed with an eerie light, his body towering over her. He spoke in a language she didn't understand, but the malice in his voice was unmistakable. "You are too late," the commander said, his voice cold and terrifying. "The Zorath Empire will not be stopped by your primitive weapons. You are nothing but insects." Blackwell didn't flinch. She had heard those words before, from enemies far stronger than the Zorath. She had seen her world burn, her people suffer, and yet, here she was, standing at the very heart of the enemy's stronghold. She wasn't going to back down now. With one swift motion, Blackwell activated the device. A pulse of energy erupted from the machine, sending a shockwave through the entire base. The Zorath commander screamed as his body was engulfed in the energy field, his weapons shutting down, his movements slowing. The entire base trembled, and for a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. The Zorath fleet, thousands of miles above Earth, was caught in the same energy pulse. Their ships froze, their weapons useless, and their communication systems went dark. The tide had turned. As the base continued to shake, Blackwell knew this was the moment. The Zorath had been defeated, at least for now. Earth had survived. The resistance had delivered its blow, and humanity now had a fighting chance. But Blackwell also knew the war wasn't over. The Zorath would regroup, and they would come again. But Earth had crossed the turning point. Humanity had shown its strength, its will to survive, and its determination to fight back. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, there was hope. As Blackwell stood in the control room, the sounds of the Zorath Empire collapsing around her. She whispered, "We will fight. We will never surrender." The world was frozen. Not in the way most people imagined the apocalypse, but in a true, chilling silence. The once bustling cities, the hum of life, the sounds of machines working it all, came to a halt the moment the Earth froze. Scientists had predicted the possibility of a new ice age, but no one had expected it to happen so suddenly, so violently. In a matter of days, temperatures plummeted to unthinkable lows, and every living creature on Earth was fighting to survive in a world where the sun had become a distant memory. It was an event that defied explanation. No one knew why or how it happened, but the result was undeniable. Nations were buried under layers of snow and ice, and humanity was left struggling for survival in makeshift underground bunkers, holding on to the hope that the world could be saved. And somewhere, in the heart of this frozen wasteland, a message was waiting to be discovered. The story begins with Sarah Thompson, a young woman who had been part of a team sent to investigate an ancient facility buried deep within the Arctic Circle. The facility had been abandoned long before the Ice Age took hold, and its purpose was shrouded in mystery. All that was known was that it was built by a civilization that had vanished long before humanity had even risen. Some believed it was a research station, others thought it might have been a military outpost, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was that inside the facility, there was a signal that had been detected by satellites just before they went offline. It was the only clue, the only piece of the puzzle that could offer hope in a world that had forgotten what it meant to be alive. Sarah's team arrived at the facility after weeks of treacherous travel. The cold was unbearable, the winds howling like wolves, but Sarah had been trained for this. She had faced worse conditions in her life, and she wasn't about to back down now. Her mission was clear: find the source of the signal and uncover the mystery of the facility. But as she and her team ventured deeper into the structure, something felt wrong. The air was stale, and the walls of the facility seemed to hum with an eerie energy, as if they were alive. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps as they moved cautiously through the dark, frozen halls. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became. It felt like they were intruding on something ancient, something that had been hidden away for a reason. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When they reached the central chamber, they found something that made their hearts stop. At the center of the room was a massive block of ice, unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was perfectly clear, yet it seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Inside the block was something frozen in place. Sarah stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. It was a figure encased in the ice, but it wasn't human. It was taller, its body elongated and skeletal, with strange markings running across its skin. Its face was hidden in shadow, but its eyes were glowing. It was the first sign of life they had encountered since the freeze had taken over the planet, and it was the last thing Sarah had expected to find. The team stood in silence, staring at the figure trapped in the ice. For a moment, no one spoke. No one dared to. Then, Sarah reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the surface of the ice. It was cold, colder than anything she had ever felt, but there was something else, something deep within the ice, calling to her. A soft humming noise began to emanate from the block of ice, growing louder with each passing second. The figure inside shifted slightly, as though it was moving in response to Sarah's touch. The temperature in the room dropped even further, and Sarah felt a chill creeping into her bones. She pulled her hand back, but it was too late. The ice cracked. The sound of cracking ice echoed through the chamber like thunder, and the figure inside the block began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it rose to its feet, its limbs stiff and unyielding at first. Sarah's heart raced. The creature wasn't human, that much was clear, but it seemed familiar, as if it had been waiting for something. The creature turned its head toward them, its glowing eyes fixed on Sarah, and for the first time in her life, she felt a fear she couldn't explain. It wasn't fear of the unknown, it was fear of something far older, far deeper than she could comprehend. The creature opened its mouth, and in a voice that was both haunting and familiar, it spoke. "You should not have come." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The voice was like ice itself, cold and ancient, and yet there was a strange familiarity to it. She had heard it before, in dreams, in nightmares. The creature continued, its voice echoing in the chamber like a warning. "The message. It was never meant for you. It was meant for those who came before. The ones who sealed us away." Sarah felt her knees go weak. The creature's words were like a riddle, but there was no time to think about them. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The walls of the facility began to groan, as though the entire structure was coming alive. "Get out," the creature whispered, its voice now a low growl. "The message is not for your kind." Before Sarah could react, the creature reached out, its long fingers brushing against the ice that still surrounded it. With a crack, the ice shattered completely, and the figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and unnatural. The team turned to flee, but the path to the exit had vanished. The walls closed in, sealing them inside the chamber. The creature let out a low, mournful cry. "You've awakened something that cannot be undone." Sarah knew then that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding the message, about unraveling a mystery that had been hidden for millennia. The world was frozen, yes, but the secrets hidden beneath the ice had the power to change everything. And in that moment, Sarah understood. The message wasn't just about saving humanity. It was about understanding the true nature of the world they had inherited. It was about finding the truth beneath the ice and unlocking a power that could either save them or destroy them all.